Yeah.
Hi, Kate, and thank you so much for joining us today on Success is Never Accidental and fitting me in before the school run.
Thank you, Lynn. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, the school run is always calling, isn't it? Every weekday.
Every weekday. So, Kate, start at the beginning. You're a social worker just like me. So, why social work?
I think I've reflected for many years over my choices, and I think it goes all the way back to upbringing for me and the way I was raised. So I was brought up in a single parent household. My mum raised me. She has a social work background, and I think values were very, very strong in our household, and that led me on a path, I think, of strong values, seeing deprivation because I grew up on a social housing estate, and also aspirations for people who were in vulnerable situations and what people can achieve and do great things. So it led me to initially the voluntary sector. And I worked for the London Lighthouse and Terence Higgins Trust, which is an HIV and AIDS organisation at the transition where combination therapy had become more normal. And so we were seeing less death in that sector and more life for people. And it was really interesting for me because coming in at a very young age, I was supporting families and children with an HIV diagnosis who then had all of the years ahead of them in terms of life, and what that looked like. And really, that experience of the third sector, the voluntary sector, alongside my own upbringing, brought me into social work, and where I am now, I suppose, has been that journey.
It's amazing, isn't it, what motivates us? Because that was a tough gig to start, by the way. I mean, that was not your typical social work first job. But funny, my background was similar. But I went to work in a holiday camp in England the year after I finished school. And it was for the very first time that I'd been exposed to that kind of deprivation, that the seasonal workers had no certainty in their life, didn't know what was going to do next, and yet had amazing resilience. So I actually got the boat back from England because nobody flew in those days. And I changed my course from French and English because I initially was going to teach to social work.
Amazing, amazing. And that's interesting as well, isn't it? Because I started a degree in journalism in London and then realised I didn't want to do that and moved back into the social work. And I think, we talk about this quite a lot. We've talked about it before in terms of social work is a vocation. It's almost in your blood. And once you get the taste for the work and the sort of support that you can give and the change that you can make to people's lives, that really changes your trajectory, and it changed mine and yours in terms of that education platform.
And there's a very important lesson there, because our values and our potential have to be aligned with whatever career we choose. And I think
Absolutely.
sometimes it's really important that if we're on the wrong path, that we identify that and that we switch as soon as possible, because I've seen lots of people who've stuck in careers where they're not fulfilled. And
Absolutely.
as social workers, we might end the day exhausted, but usually fulfilled and exhausted.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell me a wee bit then about, because within social work, then you've taken a route which is very much about education, reflective practice, really about supporting your colleagues in a variety of different ways.
Absolutely. So I started my statutory career in adult services and moved up the ranks to management, and then moved over to children's services, becoming a deputy service manager within a London local authority. And throughout that process, I trained as a practice educator and was very supportive of students coming into the services and teams that I managed, but also supervision and coaching conversations were a part of the work that I was doing in support of the teams as well as students coming in. when I got pregnant with my first child, my son, I was definitely at the end of my tether with statutory social work, like a lot of people are. And I was definitely straddling the line of burnout, I would say, and spending a lot of time, majority of my time, in fact, in the High Court giving evidence. And sort of had an epiphany when I was heavily pregnant, and then had the opportunity, obviously, to go on maternity leave, which then changed my trajectory slightly. So I had a career gap. But then during that time, we hit the pandemic. A few years later, but we hit the pandemic, and at that time we were all offered the opportunity to come back onto the register in England for qualified social workers, to see whether we wanted to step back into the profession during the pandemic. And I made that step back into the profession, having said through that experience of burnout that I probably wouldn't re-enter the profession. It realised that I had missed it. And that sort of...
Talk to me about how you overcome feelings of burnout. How do you, having got that lesson, how do you become more resilient? What were some of the mindset changes you made, or the disciplines that you started to use routinely to help you be more resilient when you came back?
So, I mean, absolutely, there had to be a mindset change. And by that time, I had become a parent. So that very much fundamentally changes the way you think and the time pressure that you have. But for me, it was very much being boundaried in my approach. This is what I can give to the work that I'm doing, and for me to feel in control, and I had the power in that relationship in order to be successful. But also I had a child then, so I had to be boundaried in my time. And I was still at what I found was I was still as committed to the profession as when I had left. And that, for me, that commitment and the understanding again of the values and the passions around social work was what then drove me to start in a qualified social work position, move up back into management, and then during the lockdowns of the pandemic, manage a service remotely. And again, stepping into what does supervision mean? What are coaching conversations for staff? And that had a profound effect for me in reigniting the passion, as you alluded to before, for education within social work, but for also not just students, but also newly qualified social workers, and ensuring that social workers stay in the profession.
So that is fascinating, because there is a sort of sense within social worker that commitment means you have to work yourself into the ground, and that you have to work long hours. But what you're saying is you have to reappraise all of that. And so that we keep social workers in the profession, which is a fundamental focus for us nowadays, then you have to teach, don't you, that we have to be boundaried in our approach. Our time management has to get better. We have to learn to prioritize the most important things. And we have to stay in control. Because you and I both know, Kate, that when people use that O word, the overwhelm word, overwhelm and stress just mean we have lost this, either the sense or the reality of being in control over our environment. And one of the ways we stay in control is exactly what you're saying. It's about having boundaries, it's about being disciplined, it's about knowing what we can do and know what we can't do. But being a parent brings real life into it, isn't it? If I'm not a parent and I say I have to leave at 5 o'clock, there's an element of doubt in there as to whether I'm going to follow through. But if you have a child who has to be picked up at daycare at 5:30, then you are in your car in the car park at 5 o'clock. And then we start to realize the art of the possible. We can get more done if we're more efficient with our time. So you've moved on more recently, Kate, to now leading a very valuable service, the professional support service within the British Association of Social Workers. And that came about due to a realization, as you said, that during COVID, people needed support because they were either isolated or unsure or whatever. So tell us a little bit about why that service has proven to be so effective?
I mean, coaching in social work is a very interesting concept because unlike other fields or professions, it hasn't had the significant uptake. And yet we can see the outcomes for social workers who go through the coaching process. And so for me, it was in late 2022, actually, I came to the realization that through my practice education, I was having significant coaching conversations. And it's something that I've been aware of for, more than a decade, but hadn't got an accreditation in coaching. And so I got an accredited coaching certificate and was then even more passionate. So I'm now undertaking a master's in coaching and mentoring via Oxford Brookes University. And during all of that came the opportunity for heading up the service for the professional support service for BASWA. And what we have seen during the pandemic was, yes, social workers needed additional support and an additional outlet that was alongside supervision. So what I want to emphasize is that coaching is not separate from supervision, but this is another way of social workers accessing support and being able to really empower social workers in understanding where are their what is causing them to feel it the way they are feeling at that moment. And so what we've seen through the professional support service is social workers that might come into the service feeling very downtrodden, very beaten by the system, feeling like they are not in control or do not have the power within the situation that they're in. But by having a coach, by being able to unpick some of that, to make them feel empowered by that conversation and feel back in control. What can I do about this situation if I'm not receiving regular supervision or I'm not feeling heard? Who do I need to go to realign that? And that has a powerful and incredibly transformative approach for social workers in order for them to see the bigger picture.
Super. And of course, coaching isn't just a feature in social work. In my world, I'm coaching people in all kinds of environments, and you recently have taken on clients outside of social work as well. So, coaching is, as you say, that safe space that allows people to just unpick some of the things that are going on and reappraise it in that. And I love that word, in that coaching conversation, where our job as coaches is really just to ask exploratory questions, because people very often, they know the answers to their own situations, but they just maybe haven't had the bandwidth to actually think, or not had the people just asking them questions that lead them focus on growing and developing and solving their problems, as opposed to sometimes just maybe questions that actually make the situation feel worse. But
Absolutely.
one of the other things that you and I know is just how important teams are. So from your own experience, and you've actually led a number of very different teams, why are teams so important, just generally, not just in social work, but in business, in all professions?
I think we almost forget how unique we are as individuals. And what that means is we bring individual skills into the team dynamic. And having a strong team, a compassionate team, an enthusiastic team of people around you in whatever profession means that you feel successful. You feel like you can take on whatever challenges are in front of you. And that makes a significant difference. You feel safe. Safety is a massive aspect here, isn't it? Because if you feel like you feel safe, you can challenge the system, you can ask difficult questions or have difficult conversations, and you've got people in your network that you can trust, it makes a significant difference to how a team can function.
And you talked about networks there. You're involved in a number of networks as well, including some UN networks. Why is it so important that we constantly build relationships and we network outside of our own profession and outside of our own country even.
This is a really important area for me at the moment, because I think social work for a long time has only done what social work has done. And actually, we can learn a lot from other professionals and other people, other people's thinking and how they approach things. And when we look at the social graces, which I talk about a lot, which is a model from John Burnham, a very social work model, but actually came through family therapy, when we look at that model and we think about all of the multifaceted areas of our life, actually we learn so much from each other. We learn so much from different people and different cultures, and how, if by exploring that, we're being able to reflect on what could I do differently? Is there anything that I can change here to be more proactive, to be more successful?
Yeah. And you're very reflective in all of it. Your style is just to be reflective. So if there was one thing you could tell your younger self, Kate, what would it be?
I think it would be go with the flow. I think I am now a very reflective person, as you say, and we've had lots of reflective conversations, but that has come with age and also through trauma. I think everything that happens in our life we can learn from, whether that is positive or negative. And what that means is we can look at how can we change and how can we support ourselves to be a better person and more successful in the future. And I think that's what I strive to do, really.
And when we allow ourselves that permission to go with the flow and to not constantly be on the go, if you like, as opposed to go with the flow, there's a peace comes from that. I think, though, you made another important, I know you made another important point there, because I've worked on myself for like 30 years. You're younger, you've worked on yourself for maybe 15 or 20. Would you encourage people to listen to podcasts, to go to events with people like Tony Robbins, to actually do that work on themselves? And I think what happens, I try to say people, they write books on this stuff because it's not unique to you. You know, everybody needs to do this work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is a journey. I think we look at education as being this sort of physical thing. We must be learning about a subject, but actually, isn't our most important education who we are and who we strive to be? And that would be our biggest learning. And that is our biggest achievement, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Well, on that point, what does success mean to you?
I think that has changed over the years. And I think success now means to me being happy in the space that I sit in and supporting others to achieve their potential.
What a beautiful note to end. Kate Cuthbertson, thank you so much for joining us today on Success is Never Accidental.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
I'm going to stop the recording so we can chat for just a moment. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.